I've made the mistake of promoting people who shouldn't have been promoted, by the way, everybody. I made the wrong call putting people in jobs they shouldn't have been in. But at least I'm making decisions. Like if you just sit back and are afraid to make a decision, I'd rather make a mistake than get it and learn from it than just think I'm going to get it right all the time or be frozen and not make decisions. But so many people get promoted because they're good at a widget. Great widget doers maybe shouldn't be bosses. On the flip side of that, if you're listening and you're aspiring to be in management, a lot of people I've talked to do it because it's more money. That isn't the right reason to go up. And this is from a guy who at one time in my late 20s looked at it that way. Oh, I got to be a boss so I can make more money. I just happened, thank goodness, for the people I was responsible for. And I told y'all what my first 10 years was like. It wasn't always great. But thank goodness I actually had an eye for leadership. I always found leadership fascinating. I think managing people's heads, managing people's aspirations, and balancing a cold, dark corporation's aspirations with the human aspiration, fascinating. There is a science behind it that I enjoy. My undergrad sociology. I find people really interesting. For a guy who doesn't often come off like that, I was kind of natural for it. And I don't know if a lot of people are. So if you're listening and you're good at something and you enjoy it, don't go chase a job that is more than you want or what you think it is just because more money comes with it or you think more money comes with it. More responsibility doesn't often equal more satisfaction. And your happiness is important too, because if you're not happy or content where you work and what you're doing, the people you're responsible for will feel that. And now you've ruined them. So don't take on more than you think you can chew for money. Do it because you have a heart for wanting to shepherd people towards a common goal. And I'll stop talking. Those two things I wanted to pull the thread on.
Those are beautiful and powerful messages. And I feel like we could mic drop and end this episode now because there was so much gold there. And I'll just pull on a couple of threads. We should come back to this topic because there is so much more that we can talk about here. If you've been listening to this podcast, you know that I always like to look at the topics that we cover from two perspectives. So one, as a leader, if you are executing on whatever it is we're doing. So as a leader who is thinking about how to adjust their style, but also as an employee who's either aspiring to become a leader or is interacting or being challenged by their existing leader. So a couple of things that I'll just add on from each of those perspectives, and then we can wrap up with a few takeaways. Because really that is our goal, to leave you with some practical, tactical takeaways that you can use to help you in your day-to-day work or your life. And so, Patrick, thank you so much for calling out the empathy aspect. And, you always like to say you don't have empathy. And I think you and I are unique in that empathy is actually really low on our Gallup strengths. And when I first saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, am I not an empathetic person? I really care about people. I'm in HR. I'm a mom, like seriously. And one of the senior consultants at Gallup actually explained to me that if you're low on Gallup empathy, it doesn't mean that you don't care about people. It doesn't mean that you can't share space with someone when they're going through a hard time or, have the capacity to understand what they're going through. It's that it doesn't stick with you and weigh you down. So it's easier to kind of move off and then do your thing, but while still caring about people in the background. So
Benny Parada said to me once, because she had really low empathy as well, right? At least that's what she would say. I love her to death. So if she's listening to this, you're good. Don't be nervous about what I'm about to say. But she would say, she thought a lot of what happens in our careers and the jobs we do blunt our own lens of of what empathy we do have. Because so much of what we do is hard and sometimes cold and counter to like soft things. I'm not saying it as well as she did, but she had a point. Like sometimes your experiences kind of blunt those things.
Well, I think it's our brain's way of protecting us, right? Because you become desensitized to things over and over.
That's the word. I think she
Right?
actually used that word, desensitized.
And it's a coping mechanism, right? So we have friends who, it's so funny, this couple who are friends of ours, they are the happiest, most well-adjusted people, and they have the most depressing jobs. He's an oncologist and she's a divorce attorney.
Oh.
Like, could you imagine? Like, you would think,
No.
oh my gosh, what goes on in their house when they come home from work? But because they are healthy, and I'm sure that they sought help for it or put a lot of time and effort into making sure it didn't, impact their lives. But yeah, interesting nuance. So, the leader that you mentioned that's going through a really, really hard time in their life, right? And sometimes it's temporary, sometimes it's permanent. Sometimes people are just bad leaders. They could be really, really good at their job, but they're not good at the people part. Or they're not paying attention to it because there's something else acute that's going on. And they've decided that they don't care, either because it was the best business decision or just because that was their decision and that was their priority level. I think as, how to unpack how to make that decision and when to make that call is really, really tough. And I think somebody needs to bring other people in on it just to make sure that they're balancing and sometimes inviting others to serve the roles that they're not able to. So if you're a leader and you say, hey, I'm not going to be able to pay attention to people, or I'm going to skip all my one-on-ones, or I know that I'm going to drop the ball on some of these things, they should reach out and find a colleague or another leader or their HR partner or someone to fill that gap. But as an employee who's experiencing that, right, it might be really jarring for you because, sometimes when you've always dreamed about working for a particular leader because they've been known to be the best boss and they've helped accelerate people's careers and they've accomplished so much and they're so brilliant and they're all over the place. And then sometimes you get on that person's team and you know what they say, you get too close to the sun and all of a sudden you're like, wow, I'm really disappointed in this person. They're not as awesome as they made themselves out to be, or they're just a regular human being, or they're actually they don't always make the best decisions, or they don't always treat people properly. And it could be really disappointing. It's like some people say, you don't ever want to meet your heroes, right?
Mm-mm.
And I think it may not be so fair to put so much pressure on one person, right? And as a manager or as an employee, right? We're never going to get all of our support and education and mentorship and satisfaction from a single boss or from a leader. And people will disappoint us, and that's okay because nobody is perfect ever, right? They might pretend to be, but they're never perfect ever.
I was just going to say, people should just be honest about themselves. Be self-aware.
And
you've seen me say out loud to people, I screwed that up.
Oh, and you know what? It's so valuable to say that because creating the illusion of perfection creates this confusion and then this sense of like, whoa, you're not who I thought you were. And so this is easier with time when you've lived on the planet for longer and you've experienced more things. But, if you have a leader who's disappointing you in their leadership, in their personal life, obviously, like there's some red lines, right? Whether it's ethics, whether it's integrity, that you should set for yourself that say, hey, I will not work for someone if they cross this line, and that's totally okay. But if somebody's having a bad day or a bad week or a bad month, or they're really great in one area, not another area, try and find that part in someone else. Your boss does not need to be your mentor. And sometimes
they shouldn't.
And they shouldn't be, right? Because there's too much at play there in terms of their ability to control your career. And so I would say, look around you. Sometimes it's at the same company. Sometimes it's in a different company. Sometimes it's in a completely different industry or domain. They don't even need to be more senior than you. They could be a peer. They could be somebody who has more experience. And assemble your own personal board of directors, right? Where you get what you need from each person.